Adult Learning Principles, 7 Principles for Good Practice. In 1987, the American Association of Higher Education published Arthur W. Chickering and Zelda F. Gamson's paper, The 7 Principles for Good Practice in Undergraduate Education. This was a meta-analysis of over 50 years of research. It is still widely accepted as a solid foundation for both good teaching and student learning. The 7 principles for good practice are: encourages contact between students and faculty, develops reciprocity and cooperation among students, encourages active learning, gives prompt feedback, emphasizes time on task, communicates high expectations, respects diverse talents and ways of learning. Encourage contact between students and faculty. This means that it is up to you to establish meaningful contact with your students. When students have meaningful contact outside the course content, they work harder, participate more often, and are not afraid to approach you to ask questions when confused. You can encourage this contact by learning and using your students' names, by having informal conversations with your students before, after, or even during class. Having virtual office hours and virtual student check-ins if teaching online or evening classes is also a great idea. Being present as an instructor not only engages the students, but it can lead to higher satisfaction for your students as well as yourself in your courses. Develops reciprocity and cooperation among students. The more the students know about each other, they will be more interested, take more risks, and be more receptive to other ideas and thoughts because they trust each other. You can encourage cooperation and camaraderie among students by using getting to know you activities on the first day of class, by encouraging students to form study groups, by integrating group projects and presentations into your course. You can also model collaboration by talking about your collaborative projects, experiences, and anything you do with your peers. Encourages active learning. Active learning is when an instructional activity engages the students in the learning process. It includes traditional activities like homework, but it also includes classroom activities. In some classrooms, most of the time is spent with the professor lecturing while students watch and listen. In active learning instruction, the professor engages the students by asking them to help solve problems, formulate questions, discuss, explain, brainstorm, debate in class, and anything else that engages them actively. Give prompt feedback. Feedback lets you and the student know what they do know and what they do not know. I like to think of feedback as an early guide that helps students get on the right path. Giving prompt feedback early lets the students know what they need to work on and what they're doing okay in. The key word here is prompt. If you wait too long, it is discouraging for students, and students do not know if anything is wrong, and they will continue just as they were. So encourage your students to read the feedback, and if possible, allow them to resubmit the project or paper. Use peer feedback for assignments. Not only does it allow the students to practice delivering feedback themselves, but it ultimately saves you time. Emphasizes time on task. According to Chickering and Gamson, time and energy equal learning. Learning can be enhanced by increasing the time and energy spent on the actual course materials. This is where active learning comes into play. When they are actively engaged in the course, they are creating a connection by thinking about the materials and exploring the content. Reducing the time spent on non-content related tasks saves time so that the students can expend their energy where it is important. One way to do this is to use Blackboard appropriately, making sure the design and the flow of your content are always the same week per week, and that the students know exactly where to go to find the information they need. The less time they spend figuring out the technology, the more time they spend engaging in the content. Communicate high expectations. As educators, we need to hold our students to high standards, and we also need to do what we can to help them be successful. If they are successful, then so are we. Start off by telling them what to expect from day one and be willing to support their efforts. You can show them samples of prior students' work that met your expectations, with permission, of course. When assigning work, have consequences for late or even sloppy work. Encourage your students to do better throughout the course. When you give feedback, let them know what works and let them know what did not work and what they need to work on. Last but not least, model your expectations. You can't have spelling errors in your materials if you are expecting your students to not have any spelling errors in theirs. Respect diverse talents and ways of learning. Talents and ways of learning come in many different varieties. Create a diverse classroom that delivers content using different methods. You can use video, mini lectures, discussions, groups, panels, anything that works. Some students may struggle with the way you present content during your lectures, so make sure you try and vary them to include more visual graphics and pictures. You should also keep what you consider harmless, sarcastic comments to yourself, because while you may think a comment or a question is silly, a student may not, and you're not respecting their way of learning when you make a sarcastic comment or brush off their question. In conclusion, this is one of many learning principles that have been published and widely accepted as a solid foundation for teaching and learning. These 7 principles work for all types of educators and learners, and they work synergistically with each other, multiplying the effect they have on learning.